A very good morning and welcome to the studios of News Central. Today we're having a special broadcast on the 66th anniversary, independence anniversary of the Republic of Tunisia, one of the North African countries, 66 years of independence. It's a News Central special. And my name, if I forgot to mention, is Bernard Akede. I am not alone on the program. I have a very lovely lady who looks like Tunisia this morning. Good morning, Rita.
When you say I look like Tunisia now, all right, Tunisia is a beautiful country,
It
so
is
I'll
a beautiful
accept that
country.
compliment. So thank you so much. And of course, thank you to all our viewers for joining us on this special broadcast celebrating Tunisia at 66. It's been a long struggle. Tunisia started from 1952 to 1956, and it was not an easy one, starting from the fight of the Ottoman Empire to the France, independence from France, and right now with the presidents that they have, it's been a long journey, but so far so good. 66 years of independence is a very good one for Tunisia. And today we'll be looking at different issues, looking at the politics, the governance, the economy, what makes Tunisia so special. And we have guests with us who are going to be analyzing this issue for this special broadcast as we celebrate Tunisia at 66.
Definitely.
Bernard.
One interesting place I would like to look at is tourism. Like you
Yeah.
mentioned, economy. Tourism is a huge part of Tunisia's economy. And you did mention it is a very beautiful country. It's a place that I would like to visit. Although when I look at you, I think I visited Tunisia already. So I definitely will like to visit Tunisia when I can. It's a beautiful country. Unfortunately, like many other countries who invested or who invest in tourism,
Yeah.
the country was also hit during the COVID-19 pandemic, which is also another angle that we'll be looking at. Like you've mentioned, we have several guests whom we're going to be speaking with today. And I can't wait for the program to start.
Definitely.
All right.
And we have our first guest right here with us. We have Tarek Kahlaoui. He's a former director of the Tunisian Institute of Strategic Studies from Tunis, Tunisia. Thank you so much for joining us on this special broadcast today.
Thank you for inviting me.
All right, so we're looking at the issue of the independence of Tunisia. Let's go a bit back into history because we cannot forget a particular name, which is Habib Bagoui, which was the first, they called him the Supreme Commandant because he was the one that instituted independence in Tunisia. And we saw so much struggle of Habib talking about the French colonial powers, which saw him going to different prisons and finally fighting their way to independence. So how would you analyze the man Habib Bagoui, the man who brought about independence in Tunisia, as much as all the people who also helped him to attain independence in Tunisia?
Well, Habib Bourguiba is a major historical figure in Tunisian modern history. He's one of these post-colonial leaders who instituted the post-colonial states throughout Africa, so Tunisia, Algeria, in the many African countries who got basically independence either from the French or the British empires. It was the same wave of the 1950s, 1960s, early 1960s. And he was one of them. He was one of these major African leaders who led a national liberation movement in his country, in Tunisia. And after basically an armed struggle in the 1950s, by 1955, the negotiations started with the French, and in a year, let's establish first of all a clear component in Tunisian modern history and the Tunisian post-colonial state, which was not really very different from other Middle Eastern and African states. This was an authoritarian regime. So with Bourguiba and Ben Ali, even though there were economic reforms, the GDP was evolving, sometimes at 5%, especially with Ben Ali. Yet these were authoritarian regimes that actually committed many infringements against the rights of many Tunisians, put many people in prison because of their political views, and disregarded basically the right of political difference, and was very harsh against the opponents of the two regimes. Bourguiba and Ben Ali. But they were a little bit different. Bourguiba was a lawyer, and he was a civilian, and he was a politician. He led the National Liberation Movement. So he had political reflexes. He would be very careful in how to deal with political opponents. Ben Ali was an army general. He was introduced within the Ministry of Interior. He became one of the generals of the security forces, and he took part in actually repressions against demonstrations, social movements in 1978, 1984. So his reflexes when he took power in 1987, after a brief period of basically trying to establish some kind of a democratic transition, which proved later to be false. He started a policy of repression beginning from the 1990s, the early 1990s, and he proved to be a harsher dictator than Bourguiba. So that's an essential difference. Ben Ali was not very respectful and welcoming of political differences. He was harsher than Bourguiba in repressing opponents. So that's a difference between both of them. Another major difference between Bourguiba and Ben Ali is that Bourguiba was never corrupt as a person.
Revolution.
Well, the Arab Spring is a very important event because, you know, in contemporary world history, I mean, the only region in the world that did not actually encounter a wave of democratization, of revolutions that would push for more democratization, the only region was the Middle East and North Africa, the MENA region. And so sub-Saharan Africa had its wave of democratization before the MENA region. So, and there was this tendency to question the reasons why we are lagging behind as Arabs when it comes to democratization. And there were even theories that maybe there is a non-compatible relationship between Islam and democracy. But other Islamic countries like Turkey, non-Arab Islamic countries, Turkey, Indonesia, Malaysia, had their own democratization experience. So it's not really about Islam. There is a specific economic, social, political, geopolitical situation that is very complicated that makes despotism, authoritarian regimes very powerful in the Arab world. And that actually made the Arabs lagging in terms of democratization. Now, when 2011 happened, when in December 2010, actually it started in December 2010 in Tunisia, in some marginalized regions, quickly moved to the major cities by early January. And then after Ben Ali fled, the dictator of Tunisia fled in January 14th, I mean, the whole authoritarian regime was shaken up. And people were basically dominating the streets and the political transition. And that was basically the reason why you're going to have the spread of revolts everywhere in the Arab world. And social media certainly played a major role in breaking up the monopoly of these authoritarian states on the media. So many things happened since then. Some experiences quickly failed and went into very chaotic situations and conditions. That's the case of Syria, for instance, a very long civil war that is until now. And the civil war was taken as an opportunity by radical Islamist, extremist, terrorist groups like ISIS to flourish. You have other situations where you have a very brief democratization transition and then a military coup, and then basically stability under a military coup, which is the case of Egypt, which has now very growing fast GDP under Sisi, even though it's a despotic regime. And then when we have the case of Tunisia, which is very interesting because we had more or less a successful, at least formally, successful political transition. 10 years of elections, of political freedoms, of free elections, Many governments came in, very flourished political life, so many parties. But it was a failure in two dimensions. First of all, this political transition